Vanessa Fabre, and I'm here at the Be All Conference in Chicago, Illinois. This is the Midwest's largest transgender conference. And with me today is Karen Hart. She's a licensed clinical social worker in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you very much.
So you have two presentations at this year's conference. Could you tell us a little about your presentations?
Yes, the first presentation was today, and it was about gender identity and psychotherapy and the relationship between the two.
So what are your main points that you're making in that presentation?
Well, essentially in that presentation, I gave a lot of information about where gender identity comes from, and it turns out that pretty much it's biological in nature, and gender is just something that's innate and it's immutable. And so the question becomes, well, why then psychotherapy? Because people are somewhat guided into psychotherapy whenever they raise some issues about gender. And I think it's just, unfortunately, just a cultural bias to think that if you're raising questions about gender, there must be something wrong with you, and therefore you need psychotherapy. And the truth is, you don't. You don't need any psychotherapy based on your gender identity. Who you think you are is who you are. But you may have some emotional issues surrounding that, like if you're not accepted well by others, that rejection may cause, some pain, some anger, frustration, depression, and those things are things that you need to cope with, those emotional issues, and that might be a reason for psychotherapy.
Did you find that people in the audience at your presentation had already a lot of experience with being referred to psychotherapy and their experiences in psychotherapy?
Well, some of them did talk about psychotherapy, but more really than anything else, they were interested in understanding gender identity and its underlying origins. I think people started really trying to figure out, well, why is it that we have this cultural bias, and why is it that we think that psychotherapy is an answer for these kinds of issues? I think people were really more directed towards that, and so we really did get a good discussion about how can you cope with all kinds of issues in general, including issues regarding your gender.
So you had another presentation, and I was wondering if you could talk about that for us as well.
Yes, well, tomorrow I'm giving my presentation on communication, and I present my technique. It's called the Better Communication Technique, fairly simply named, but it's really a very simple but a well-researched method for helping people learn how to communicate effectively. And essentially what I mean by that is to communicate in an assertive style. And the bottom line for being assertive is simply telling people what you want and what you don't want. And what I do is I lay it out as a simple technique to help you learn to start saying these things, because people have a lot of difficulty saying what it is they want. And for other reasons, they have a lot of difficulty saying what they don't want. They hate to reject other people, reject other people's ideas. But unfortunately, this is something that you have to do in life when you're confronting an issue. You have to tell people how you feel. If you instead don't tell them what you feel, you make up things and you start trying to manipulate other people, you end up with a lot of trouble and you destroy relationships. So the idea really is to get people to be very straightforward in how they approach others, tell them what you feel, tell what you want, tell what you don't want, let the other person say the same thing back to you, and really create a very genuine relationship. And that's the foundation for it. And when you can do that, you can improve your relationships and you start feeling better about yourself. You feel also better about yourself because then you can get further in the world. You're getting what it is you want as best you can.
And so what types of relationships are you thinking about? Is this kind of across the board, or more romantic relationships or work relationships?
Yeah, it's a good question, because when I present it, people immediately think this is all about romantic relationships and maybe friendships. But the truth is that, a lot of our relationships are business relationships, especially at the workplace, and we need to be able to communicate effectively just as much to those people. Otherwise, we're going to be really frustrated at work. Can you imagine being frustrated at work? So we have to learn that. And so part of what I focus on is actually how do you deal with conversations at work when people are doing things that really are troubling for you. And yes, you use the technique with those people. Use the technique with parents, with siblings, with family, with the store clerk, with the waiter, with your doctor, or anyone you're servicing where, they're a client or customer of yours. The idea is that anytime you can communicate in a very straightforward way, you're going to have a much better relationship. It doesn't matter who you're communicating with.
So you have this universal technique. We're at Be All right now.
Yes.
So how do you think transgender people can learn from this style of communication and your technique and use it to improve their lives?
Well, transgender people are facing, of course, the issue of what do they do about their feelings of gender. Well, then the truth is they've got to live life on their own terms like we all do. And they have to be able to just be themselves. And so to be yourself, you've got to go tell people what it is that you want. But the first step is to say, my name is this, and I want you to use the female pronoun. Right? And it's a real simple statement, but it started with the two words, I want. And really, that's at the core of my technique, is I teach people to do that. You'd think people would already have the idea. And I think when we're born and we're little kids, we do that. If you listen to how little kids talk, that's pretty much how they do it. But unfortunately, our society kind of trains us to ignore that, our natural tendencies, and to talk in this way that's, it's socially acceptable, but basically fundamentally unsound, and it's manipulative. And unfortunately, we're basically taught not to ask for what we want, and not to tell people what we don't want. And that's become the biggest issue for transgender people, I've found. I've had a lot of transgender clients where the biggest focus on helping them is to get them to simply get back out into the world and be themselves and be assertive about that.
So you gave that example of asking people, telling people their preferred pronoun. What are some other specific examples that you've seen that are really like some big challenges in communication for either your transgender clients or people you know? In addition to the preferred pronoun, what are some challenges people face?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, people have to face issues about their relationships. I mean, they have to tell people the come out process, essentially. And that's a really scary process for people. So I teach them how to have that kind of conversation. I mean, once you could be out to people, once you can be genuine with people, it becomes so much easier, right? And you feel so much better. And it's true that some people are not going to accept you, absolutely. But it turns out that's a really small percentage of people. And I think people don't realize it. They're just so afraid it's going to be everyone, and it turns out it's not. It's a really small percentage. When they can finally just take that first step forward, they can breathe easier, and then they can take the next step forward. So that's really how it all starts. So there's other ways you can do this, but anything you can do to simply allow yourself to be yourself through your communication with others is going to put you on the path to your own happiness and self-development.
Well, clearly a few minutes of time, couldn't give really full service to all your work. Where can people go for more information or resources, especially to learn about your communication techniques?
Well, the Better Communication Technique is available in a written tutorial form on my website, which is www.karenlifecoach.com. And I've written a book about this, and the book is available on Amazon.com as well as my website. And the book has a copy of the tutorial in it to teach about communication, but it also talks all about self-esteem and relationships and self-improvement and all the things that I've learned through all my research work and my clinical experience to help people simply self-actualize.
Well, thank you for being with us here today, and we've given the viewers some information if they'd like to find out more.